Hi, we'd like to extend our stay.
And upgrade.
Hi, residents. Welcome back. I'm Ari.
And I'm Lexi.
Today, we're picking up where we left off last week. Last time, we brought you policies to acknowledge between Europe and the United States, gaps between those policies, and broader policy implications.
Today, we are talking all about how to fill those gaps with meaningful improvements and ways in which we can individually and collectively stage a consumer rebellion.
Exactly. And for this, I bring it back to simple economics. We used a word quite frequently in last week's episode, and that word was demand. So, demand. The market responds to what the people want. Good, successful companies fulfill a need for their customer. That's how good business operates. Otherwise, they wouldn't be successful. And Tucker Garrison explains this really well.
I think that systemic change can be made through shifting your purchasing towards things that you agree with and that matter, and away from things that you don't agree with, right? Like that's a great thing we can do. And again, I understand that part of this comes down to privilege, and that like many people are struggling at this time, especially with all the rising costs and everything going on. And so it's like there are big and small ways that can happen, but especially if you have the means to do so, like shifting as many of your purchasing choices to a direction that's supporting the companies and people, like it has a multiplying ripple effect, right? Because then all the dollars that you give to somebody that also cares usually get spent somewhere else good, right? And yeah, I won't go in more of like the economic systems of that, but like there's a lot around island economics. Like for example, in Hawaii, is a great place to like think about island economics of like where do you spend your dollar on that island has a huge impact on whether that dollar stays on the island and moves between local people, or whether you spend it at, Kroger, and then that dollar immediately flies in a computer back to the mainland and doesn't get spent on the island. Whereas if you buy it at a local supermarket, that dollar then gets spent down the street of the food truck, and then the food truck spends it, wherever it's being spent, right? So I think it's important for people where the world feels so big and it feels like there is such a large amount of systemic change needed, that like what you can do every day to start with is just be conscious about where you're spending your money. And then hopefully that changes you, right? Like then you go, oh, actually, I want to get more involved in what's happening in, my local agricultural community, or I want to get involved more in banning pesticides, or I want to get more involved in whatever the thing is that calls to you.
He says that we need to create the standard of living and the market will follow.
And we should also add watching out for when the producer is creating something for us to consume that is not actually part of what we want, like feeding into some of the trends of overconsumption.
Thank you.
Which is something that we actually
Excellent
addressed
point.
in the plastic season.
The plastic season.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent point. I mean, like, just if you guys didn't catch the plastic season, a really good analogy for this is like when you order a product online and it comes in all of this packaging. You didn't ask for the packaging, did you? You didn't ask for any of the styrofoam peanuts, any of that synthetic shit. You didn't ask for the petroleum-based packaging. You didn't ask for the plastic. You didn't ask for the box. You asked for the product. All the other stuff, they produce and exploit resources to send it to you, even though you didn't ask for it. There's no demand for the plastic.
No.
There's the demand for the product. Good point.
And part of the issue here is that as a whole, people don't realize we need a demand for change to occur. Even though we are saturated with horrific, planet-destroying, life-altering media about it, for some reason, the release of undercover media from a tuna Hello? Tuna boat killing dolphins isn't hitting the same as in 2026 as it did in what,
Yeah.
1988? And
Yeah,
perhaps
really, really good point.
we have become desensitized. Perhaps your algorithm is not pushing that kind of content to you. Perhaps greenwashing and really effective communication campaigns from companies have effectively made us, well, at least most of us, believe that there really isn't an issue or that the issue is not something that we are a part of. Or if
Yeah.
there was, like if you are seeing these things, they're on top of it with their all natural products on the shelves,
Ooh.
which goes back to the consumption issue.
I really want to pause there. I want people to reflect on that for a second. Like, think about your sensitivity to this kind of information these days. Like, do you think that that would hit the same in 2026 as it did in 1988? Well, that's not that far ago, guys. The far ago? That's not that long ago. Like, I do wonder if it's desensitization or algorithm, like, algorithms, what they're pushing to people, or, what it could be. But whatever, regardless, we're kind of lacking a demand, as Lexi said. So allow us to help create some demand. Just give us the luxury of creating a little demand for you. I mean, Lex, that's kind of what we've been doing,
Yeah,
right? With the
subtly.
agriculture season. I mean, subtly, with
Maybe not so
Hoteler 360,
subtly.
really. Maybe it's not that subtle. But we are trying to create demand. We're sort of like, if I may, we're sort of like that undercover biologist that went on the Panamanian boat in 1988 to expose what the tuna industry was doing to the cute little dolphins. I mean, except we didn't commit to espionage, and
True.
we're doing a lot of this podcast from the comfort of our own homes.
Facts.
So, shout out to Samuel LeBud for his dedication to the cause.
Yeah, and we've been steadily informing you about the system throughout this season, its impact, why it matters, why you should care, like your health, our natural resources, our ability to feed ourselves, human rights, all are at stake. Like all
Yeah,
of that is
dead
encompassed
ass.
in this under the
Dead ass.
current agricultural system that we are dependent on. So here are some of our guests to really emphasize this demand for you all.
Most people that live really locally, and certainly whether and certainly indigenous people, like get at their very, very deep core, like it's not a thought, it's a known and felt thing that when you take something, you also need to give back. And that really, like what we're talking about, the connection to the cycle of life, like what's happening from a climate change perspective is that like we are hollowing out the ecology of our planet without giving anything back. And it's like this one way movement of like, what can we take? It's not like this one for one thing of like, oh, I cut down a tree, so I need to plant a tree. That's great. That's kind of what we need. But like, there's there's a deeper understanding of all of the interconnections. If you take something, we can give back, right? And I think that that's at a fundamental level, like why climate change is happening, like which is at some level is what we're really talking about, is like the destruction of the biodiverse life-giving systems of our planet. That's what's causing climate change, right? And that it is the result of humans going, what can I get out of this situation? Rather than asking like, what can I give in this situation?
Especially when we have this conversation about regenerative agriculture, a lot of times that means using indigenous systems that were previously in place that got thrown out when, you know, we know what happened and got replaced with conventional agriculture, and now we're like, oh, conventional agriculture maybe wasn't the best thing to do, and so we bring back the indigenous systems, and it's not owned or led by indigenous peoples. So that's kind of, I think, one of the biggest justice issues, apart from what we touched on before with workers' rights, because that's a huge justice issue, is just unworkable conditions or horrible working conditions, and just that being, oh, it's just a part of the job is working through this rain, shine, heat wave, extreme storms, flooding, wildfires, whatever it is, that's huge. But touching on this being indigenous land that was taken, and then now being like, oh, but we want to implement these systems that are good for the land that you've been doing for thousands of years. And then for a few decades, we decided to just completely scrap that and be like, drill, baby, drill kind of energy. And then now we're like, oh no, we need to have peace with the earth. Like, oh my God, talk about performative. Talk about what? Yeah, I'm pretty sure the statistics, according to like the USDA, are like 7.2% of farms in the US are operated by indigenous folk, and that's not even owned. That's just operated. And so operated can mean maybe there's just people that work there. Maybe they are part of the process of, whatever operations are happening on this farm, but that isn't even people owning these farms. And that to me is a huge just moral issue in general and also a huge justice issue. In these contexts where there's often a lack of access to food, a lack of tasty, delicious, nutritious food, there are so many organizations doing grassroots boots on the ground work to ensure that people can access it and access it oftentimes free of cost. And that is just the coolest and most like badass act of resilience um thing you can really do. And I'm under the impression that food is a right because what are we without nourishment? I think that these greater systemic issues like food deserts and overall poverty, you shouldn't not be able to have food because you're poor or have access to food that's nourishing. You should be able to have fresh food. You shouldn't have to rely on canned food and dry goods all the time. We know how important it is to have fresh vegetables and fruits because oftentimes the nutrient load is so high. And working in communities where this is just not the norm and this is nearly foreign to cooking and preserving and knowing where your food comes from and being a part of that process, it's really it's wrong. It's wrong to like allow communities to suffer in this way and leave all of this responsibility to the communities to uplift themselves.
I think something that often gets lost a lot in these conversations when people say, we got to take care of the land. Like, oh, yeah, the land, the land, the land. One thing that people often forget is that human beings are part of the land. We come from the earth, and to the earth we shall return. And so it's very easy to devise solutions that seem to care for the land but ignore the human beings. That is at the expense of human lives. And we don't have to look very far in California to find farm worker communities who are being absolutely decimated, overworked, undercompensated, exploited in service to things that when they reach our shelves look really sexy and have nice organic labels and are very affordable and very delicious. And so many of our solutions and so many of our ways of thinking about these problems when we talk about the land ignores the fact that human beings are part of the land.
Ultimately, one of the biggest issues in all of this is money. And it's kind of like that for everything. It's always money. Who has the money, who doesn't have the money? You're People are wanting to save their money, so that's like what the whole like we're ooga booga creatures. We're just literally we have tiny monkey brains that are just like, I just want to have safety, security, and we attribute that to money a lot of the times. And when you're running a business, you're a business owner, you're like, yes, how do I use the least amount of my money and how do I make a lot more money? And it's this crazy and horrible cycle of being like, oh, well, oh, I have to pay people to do the job that I want them to? Oh no, how do I actually do that for less money? Oh, maybe I choose people that are marginalized or will take less pay for the same work because maybe they're in a sticky situation. Girl, don't get me started.
Grace Johnson has many amazing phrases, but one phrase that I want to reiterate here. She calls everyday acts of conscious food engagement, like composting, growing locally, cooking from scratch, reducing waste, sharing meals, acts of resistance. All of those things are acts of resistance, not metaphorically, actually, because to opt out, even partially, even imperfectly, of a system that profits from your disconnection from food is to refuse something that the system needs for you, your compliance, your indifference, your passivity, your willingness to just take what's served without asking where it came from or who it cost.
It's crazy to think of it as an act of resistance, but when the systems are set up in a way that are rewarding those who buy more rather than those who use well, we are left with needing to make decisions that align with our values of maybe being resourceful, being frugal, being creative with the food that we eat. We should care about these things that affect us and affect everyone. And so, yeah, we should be reducing our food waste. And you can reduce your food waste by knowing how to properly store your food. Does it go in the fridge? Is it better if it stays out in a cold, dark place? Is usually what like it'll say, cold, dark place. And is it to reduce wasting your food, do you need to prep it beforehand? Do you need to chop it up into bite-sized pieces? So, and kind of meal prep in a sense, or snack prep, so that you are more inclined to eat it. Because people are more inclined to eat something that's already prepared than not. Take that extra time to prepare this food in the way that you want to eat it. Share food with your neighbors and family and friends. There are so many ways that you can connect deeper with your community by sharing food. And that's such a beautiful thing. We all love bonding and sharing food together, I believe, and it brings us closer together. There's when you eat seasonally, a lot of the times the food is cheaper because there's an abundance of it. And so that can kind of lead to a little bit of like, oh, I've been eating that all week. Learn to be creative, learn to eat it many different ways, prepare it many different ways. These are short-term and long-term kind of things that you can do to kind of change the way you kind of interact and see food. Even just taking a second to like look up the environmental impact of the food you eat to kind of have a better idea, like how much energy goes into the meat I eat, the vegetables I eat, the dairy I eat, like, and if that means eating a little bit less of them or, changing where you're getting your things from, your products from, that can be a lifestyle change made down the line. But the first step of all of this awareness is knowledge.
Yes. Literally,
I'm
yes.
fired up.
We're fired up. All right, so we know that there's policy. We know that these policies were likely put forth or shaped by some of the voices and the grassroots campaigns on the ground who are actually dealing with the issues and wanted to see reform. And we know that the policy is lacking because of a couple things, because there's not enough demand, right, to like really close the gap. And there's industry pull, and industry wants to pull it with bigger gaps because they don't want regulation, basically, right? So who's filling the gap? Who's filling the gap? Actually, there are lots of organizations that are aiming to fill this gap. And we wanted to brief over some of those organizations that are building the food systems that we really need right now with the sources they have in the communities that need them most. So NATIFs is one of them. I know we mentioned them before, but just another brief. This is the North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems. And basically, it's working to revitalize Indigenous food traditions and make traditional foods accessible and affordable in Indigenous communities and train new generation of Indigenous food practitioners. So that's a great organization that's really working to fill the gap. And this work matters for reasons that extend well beyond Indigenous communities, right? Like this is not niche. The seed varieties, growing practices, and ecological relationships that natives and similar organizations are working to preserve are part of the agricultural biodiversity that all of us will need as the climate changes. They are not relics, they are resources.
We're going to add the founder of Natives. Sean Sherman had a TED Talk that is really powerful and speaks to the work that he and his team are doing with Natives. But we also want to talk about the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. They work at the intersection of food policy, trade, and climate, advocating for the kinds of systemic reforms that we've talked about in episode 5, as well as what we've talked about here today. And there are hyper-local organizations. We can't possibly link all of them,
Yeah.
but these are just some these are some groups for you to be aware of, because really what needs to happen is not for us to tell you about these large amorphous organizations that are not within your community. We can give you examples of good ones, and then it is an excellent opportunity for all of us to then look at what happens within our neighborhoods, within our cities, within our
Yeah.
states, and then provide our support to those local entities, because that
Yep.
is where you will have the greatest noticeable and tangible impact.
Absolutely. What all of these organizations share is a commitment to the idea that food systems should be democratic. Okay? That
Ooh. Bring democracy
that's going on a
to
t-shirt, baby.
food.
That's going on a t-shirt, baby. That the people most affected by food decisions should have the most say in them. What a concept. Oh my gosh, someone call the president and let him know what democracy actually means. So, food is not just a commodity, it's a relationship. That's what we've been trying to stress this entire season. This is a relationship between people, between land, between communities, their histories, between the food we grow and the culture we carry on our backs.
Yeah. I think this episode has gotten me probably the most fired up of any of
Fired.
fired up out of any of
Fired.
the episodes that we've done. And maybe that just is because of who I am as a person. You know, I did, quit
Definitely.
my job to go to law school because I was dissatisfied at my place of employment. But we have been building to something in this episode, and I hope that this excitement that we feel will translate to you all. And what we are giving is not a checklist, right? This episode is not meant to necessarily be a checklist.
No.
We're not going to hand you a list of virtuous behaviors and then send you on your way, because one, that doesn't really create habits, and two, it doesn't create a meaningful connection between your action and, I don't know, the change that it begets.
Right.
But instead,
Right.
this is a genuine, honest account of where individual and community action can make a real difference, and where it needs to
Yep.
be paired with structural change to matter at scale. Because when we start with one, it inevitably changes our behavior in another, and it's just this nexus, this loop of improvement. So
Absolutely.
if I might just start with food waste as
If
a
you may.
pivotal starting point. It's one of the highest leverage places where individual action and systemic change both apply. We talked about this a lot, I think, in episode 5. In your home, buy what you need, not what you aspire to cook, but what you will actually cook this week, given the life you are actually living. Plan your meals loosely. We're not sitting here saying you need to be a drill sergeant in the kitchen, and we're not necessarily advocating for rigidity, but with enough intention to reduce the gap between what you buy and what you eat is important. And it will create, like we said, those habits that cascade and last long term. And when you learn to use the whole vegetable, it's like, one, you're going to try a food you're going to try a part of a food that you have never tried before. Like, who has tried beet greens besides going to a restaurant? Like, don't say you.
Good question.
Have you?
It wasn't me.
Okay.
No.
I was
No.
gonna
I
say.
have eaten the stalks of broccoli though many times.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It
Excellent.
just tastes like broccoli, FYI. It's just broccoli. You don't
Oh,
have to throw it away.
and
It's broccoli.
here's a hot take. The tops of strawberries, the little green leaves, eat them.
Edible.
Why not?
Edible.
Not gonna hurt
Why
you.
not? Do it for the plot.
The parts of basically what we're getting at is like the parts of food we throw away because we've been trained to throw them away are often parts with the most flavor, with the most nutrients,
Yep.
or just better yet, like still food. You can also freeze things before they go bad, not after. The moment you realize you're not going to use something before it turns, that's the moment to freeze it, not 3 days later when it's already halfway to compost. For example, I'm notorious for buying a loaf of bread or baking a loaf of bread, and we only get through half of it, and then it turns into a freaking brick because we're on bread
Yeah.
overload and we can't eat it.
Right.
So what I have done is after I bake it and I let it cool, cut it in half, throw half of it in the
Put it in the
freezer.
freezer.
She's
Yeah.
fresh. She's gorge.
There you go.
Pull her out.
You know, you
bake
could
her.
you
She's
could
good.
also you could also look into some a lot of like Tuscan recipes are focused on like food that's about to go bad or like stale bread because if you guys didn't know, history of Tuscans, specifically Florentines, is peasantry, so they had to get really really creative with preserving food and like using stale bread and using like all parts of the animal and all parts of the veggies. So like if you have a stale bread that you don't want to throw away, try like, what is it called? Panzanella salad, I think. I may be saying that wrong. Sorry to my Italian listeners if I fucked it up. Let me just do a quick Google search.
I love how
Yeah,
you
panzanella.
I love how you asked as if I would have some sort of response.
Well, it's called panzanella salad. It's like a summer specialty, and it uses stale bread, tomatoes, celery, and it's actually really, really good. And there's other like soups, like papa al pomodoro, where they use stale bread. And like, anyway, there's like lots of remedies for old veg and stale bread.
I think you should link a couple of those recipes in this episode. And also, just as
good for Keta shout. Maybe he can help us out.
That would be great.
You know
I
what to
also,
do. You know what to do.
before I continue on my rant, one more thing I will point out here. I'm actually currently working on a recipe that highlights how you can use some frozen fruits that are in season right now to make berry bowls. So stay tuned for that as well. Anyways, so even after all of these efforts, if you still end up with food waste, I know we're still on the food waste of it all. Can you believe it? There's a lot to cover here. Anyways, you can always compost what remains. If your city has a composting program, use it. And use it correctly. Yep. Take the 3 minutes to educate yourself on what can and cannot go into your city composting bin.
Do you compost, Lex? Do you guys compost in San Francisco?
We compost, we recycle, and we have trash.
I love that for you guys.
You guys have really cool.
Me, myself, and I, as I live alone.
Can you take
I did
a
not need to
picture
expose myself so
of
badly.
your garbage guys on the front walk so we can put it in the episode?
Yeah.
They're so cool.
I'll include a picture of how the different single stream waste differentiators we've got here in Florence.
Thank
you.
you.
Definitely do that.
And anyways, if your city doesn't have progressive composting measures like Florence and San Francisco, you can advocate for one. Look at you, already being a policy icon, a change maker. And in the meantime...
Change maker, if you will. Influencing policy.
Are you an influencer now all of a sudden? Maybe. But anyways, as you are working on your policy change, you influencer, you cheeky devil, you can also have composting at home. If you have any outdoor space at all, a balcony, a small yard, you can do a very simple compost bin. And it's one of the most direct connections you can make between your kitchen and the soil ecosystem that your food depends on. I will note that creating this compost product, you have to do something with it. So it does require a little bit more intention than simply collecting all of your kitchen scraps and throwing it on your balcony. But again, all of this is something to explore. And if it sparks any curiosity in your brain, I highly recommend feeding that curiosity. You never know what will come out of it.
I have another idea for composting if it feels impossible for you. Get like 5 to 10 friends together and you guys can start a big like community compost. Like someone has a backyard, one of you 10 people have a backyard, that can be your compost site for all
And
10 of
a
you.
great excuse to start hanging out more because we all
Yes.
need connection.
True. So thank you, Lexi, on the food waste element for the consumer-led rebellion that we're trying to start here. Next, I'd like to get into eating, and this is a careful subject. Food is personal, obviously, and we're not here to tell you what to put in your body, but the broad direction that science points us toward is that less industrial meat, more plants, more whole foods, more seasonal and regional foods. The food focus is that's more accessible to you is where we should be aiming for here. It's like not perfection, not purity. It's just like a redirection. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you eat meat, know where it comes from. That information matters. Like a local butcher who can tell you which farm their beef is from is doing something fundamentally different from like a shrink wrapped package in a big box store with zero information included about the origin. Okay. I do this. So when I go to my butcher, I have exhausted his talking points about like, so where is this salsicha from exactly? The kilometers? How like, explain this to me. And he's just like, oh madonna mia, questa americana. Like, shut up. But I'm like, and I think he low-key likes it. I think he likes the chat. I think he likes to know that someone's interested in how the sausage is made.
Of
so to
course,
speak.
who isn't interested in talking about like their work, their practice,
their product, their work, right?
Come on.
So think when we think about origin of food and we think about the food we're putting into our bodies, and like we need to be focusing on farmers markets. We need to be focusing on CSAs and direct farm purchases to like eliminate the middleman. And these are all ways of building a relationship with your food supply, of closing that getting more connected with that cycle of life that Tucker Garrison has spoken about multiple times on this podcast series. And just like putting money directly into the hands of farmers who are trying to do things differently.
They're
Here's
out
Tucker
there.
to talk about that. Yeah. They're out there. And here's a clip of Tucker talking about that.
I believe that the future of agriculture is about small to medium scale production of food that's very like specific to the bioregions where it's being produced and is like context and bioregionally specific to where it's being grown, and that's really like the core and the foundation of it, right? That's where we have to get to in order for this to really work. I think there are some large scale systems that could exist, but if you imagine, instead of like 10,000 acres of almonds, just like as far as the eye can see, or corn or whatever it is, like what does it actually look like to use that land in a manner that's like highly productive, that's producing a diversity of different foods in a way that's actually feeding both the family that's living there and also the 10 or 100 other families that's around that land. I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to like somehow go back to an agrarian lifestyle, but I think a lot of people would if they could, right? And a lot of people, if they knew that they could actually like afford their lives, right? And I think that that's part of the challenge that we're living in, is that like the economics need to shift in a way that basically the governments of the world, from a policy perspective, again, prioritize that having a well-fed population is like an essential part of having a harmonious and free society. The soundbite on it is like we need millions and millions of small to medium sized land-based farmers and or land stewards that are taking care of places in a way that produces the food that humans need, desire, and want, that is enhancing or at least maintaining the ecology of those places, right? And that looks really different in different places, right? Like somewhere where there's pine nuts, like somebody can be stewarding like an amazing like pine nut forest, for example, and somewhere else it makes sense to grow wheat, and somewhere else it actually makes sense to be like having like free range bison roaming across a vast area of land, and they're selectively harvested from that herd, right? Like this is what happened for a really, really, really long time. And so there's a meeting point of like our know-how, our technology, and our capabilities with the indigenous practices that were utilized to like sustain a place while sustaining us at the same time. Because I just want to remind us that, like, as I mentioned, we have 50 years left. So like in 50 years, like the sand in the, in the hourglass is like going to run out, right? So we either have a choice to do this the easy way, or it's going to be the hard way. And when we get to the point where it's the hard way, it's going to be real hard. But right now it's actually like, it's actually about like humans changing policy, not about like how are we gonna like somehow manage to like reboot the life systems of the planet.
You thought that was it? Psych. No, we have more.
Psych. I hope this episode isn't like 2 hours long, but
You know
we're
what?
gonna
And
try
if
to
it
do some
is,
editing.
And if it is, again,
Whatevs.
start talking about cool stuff with your homies. You can call us your homies. So, on growing. Even if you don't have land, and even if you're not a gardener, as Ari and I discovered by doing this season that maybe
We're not
aren't.
gardeners, okay?
There are ways to participate in your local food production. Community gardens exist in most cities and towns. And if they don't, guess what? You can flex your policy change maker muscles again and advocate for one to be put into your community. But anyways, these spaces often offer plot rentals that give you a physical connection to growing food, and they almost always offer a community. People who know things that you don't, who will share seeds and knowledge and zucchini, because God, can you believe how much that plant will produce? You can't possibly
if you
eat
grow
it
a
all.
zucchini, bro, it just does not stop.
It's
It's an
the gift that
exponential
keeps on
takeoff.
going. Yeah, it's the same with like
Literally.
people who have fruit trees. Why do you think there are so many fresh lemons in the office, Susan? It's because Barbara over there cannot get rid of them fast enough. They're falling off the trees in dozens. Anyways.
Barbara and Susan and hanging out with Amanda from the top.
Exactly. Food forests like the ones in Venecia and Vallejo are increasingly popping up in cities across the country. But specifically, these are examples of community resources that anyone can visit, learn from, and even harvest from. So it's worthwhile even looking into what sort of resources exist outside of the community garden aspect to see where you might be able to go and actually participate in harvesting and keeping some of the food.
Yep.
And if there isn't one in your community, that might be a project worth starting. You see a pattern here? Local permaculture guilds, urban agriculture nonprofits, and city parks departments are often looking for partners. So, again, opportunity.
I also have a fun anecdote here that I hope inspires some of you guys. I don't even know if Lexi knows this. So my younger sister, we all love Roshan, is a physical therapist, okay, in Tampa.
DPT.
And she's a DPT, that hardworking bitch. So she's a DPT, and guess what she did? Guess what she did?
What?
This girl started a program in the hospital that she works to help close the food access gap for people in low-income communities, because she knows that nutritious food is obviously directly linked to our health. So as an effort within her hospital, she has made it like she started this project that is trying to build a collaboration essentially to like community gardens and the hospital to provide food access, or at least increase food access to patients or people who are affected in low income communities. And that is just an insanely awesome effort. And it shows that you don't have to be involved in the industry to make changes. Okay. My sister didn't study environmental science. She hears a earload from us. But
I was gonna say she might as well have.
but she works in the healthcare industry, and like that just shows that this is not only like connected to all of us, but there are things we can do to help close the gap across the board. Like you don't have to start a podcast. You don't have to necessarily go and get a PhD in like agriculture. You can do, there are things you can do. You can make strides within your industry, within your community, or just because you want to help close the gap. Like literally that demand, you just want to fill it. That's what you want to do.
And one last thing before I turn it over to Ari to talk to us about some policy change that we can do in this consumer rebellion is that if on the topic of growing, if none of these things are open to you, there's no community garden, there is no food forest nearby, there is no community resource available, and you don't have the means or the place like Roshan to implement some structural change, consider even just growing a plant at home. A pot of herbs in a windowsill is not nothing. Mint is basically a weed. Basil, as long as you give it sunlight and water, it'll pop off. Like there are so many options, like even container tomatoes. I think there are even some like if you have the budget to do one of the like grow lamp things. Any act of growing, however small, is a practice of attention, of caring about where your food comes from. It builds these habits, and it is about being, it's a form of being in a relationship with a living thing that is trying to feed you.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. Connect yourself to the cycle of life.
Thank you, Tucker Garrison.
Finally, on policy, I think we've talked enough. Let's I want to end here because I think it's the most important, arguably, and most neglected lever. Knowledge, baby. Just knowledge. Know what the hell is the Farm Bill. Okay? Did you hear about the Farm Bill before you tuned into today's episode? Did you know what that was? Okay, now you do. Congratulations. Know when it's up for reauthorization.
Yeah.
Know these things. Contact your representatives about it. Tell them you care about agricultural subsidy reform, about support for small and beginning farmers, about conservation programs that reward regenerative practices. These are not niche issues. They are policy infrastructure of the food system that you eat from and you survive on every single day. Support organizations doing food policy advocacy, IATP, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, your state's equivalent bodies. Their work shapes the regulatory environment that determines what farmers can afford to do. Okay, and we said at the top of this episode that policy, like shaping policy, isn't literally just showing up at the polls and voting, but yeah, you should do that too. Vote, bro. Vote, okay? Do that and use your voice to shape policy. Representatives, vote for representatives who understand that agricultural policy is climate policy, it's public health policy, it's radical justice policy, bro. This is civil rights.
Yes.
Civil rights. Who understands the Farm Bill is not a niche agricultural document, but one of the most consequential pieces of legislation that most Americans have never even heard of. Here's Grace Johnson on what gives her hope when she sees people connecting with local food systems.
I get such a sense of hope watching people share their stories and share their cultural dishes and do that community building that has kind of been compromised since COVID because so much fear was enveloping society. And when we're able to share meals and keep our cultural foods alive and reimagine them with cross-cultural experiences and share meals with people that you normally would not even share a conversation with, we're able to build deeper connections with ourselves and our communities and feel a part of something bigger than ourselves. Like, food isn't really a religion, but truly it is something that brings us all together, and it always will. In the times where we have nothing, food sometimes is everything, and sharing it together gives us that hope that everything will be okay and we will get through it together.
Grace's words will never not be a good place to land. I'm convinced.
I feel like we've ended almost every episode with Grace.
I love Grace Johnson. I'm putting it on a t-shirt. And it's because I think that their words really capture something important about what this season aims to do. Our purpose. We are not here to tell you that everything is fine, because everything is not fine. You wouldn't be here if you thought everything was fine, I might add. The food system is producing injustice and environmental damage at an enormous scale, and the climate is changing in ways that will make both of those things harder to manage if we do not act with urgency. Step one, getting here, listening to this podcast, check it off your to-do list, baby.
But we are not here to tell you that it's hopeless either. It is not, and it never has been. Okay?
Yeah,
The
facts.
people we've spoken with, facts, okay? It's never been hopeless. Even when people, Lexi and I, the bleakness gets the better of us sometimes. Like we said at the top, sometimes we're just like, system's too big, I can't do I'm gonna eat my
Bonbons and cry.
strawberry leaves in my bed and cry. Okay? But it's never been the case. Even when you've got the bleak blues. The people we've spoken with throughout this season, Grace, Tucker, Zion, Cole, Aaron, the farmers and food justice advocates and land stewards and educators, these are not people who are waiting for someone else to fix things, okay? They are building right now with what they have in the places where they are.
And that's what we all can do, should be doing. Don't be fearful. Be curious. That's the ask here today. Not certainty, not perfection, just curiosity. Curiosity about where your food comes from, about who grew it, and under what conditions, about what your community's food system could look like if it were designed around people rather than profit, about what you might grow or cook or advocate for or support that would make the future a little more real.
Next week, we're moving into new territory. We're going to talk about cooking specifically. Lexi's rubbing her hands together like an evil menace. About how the act of preparing food has changed over the last century, what we've lost in that shift, and what it would mean to reclaim a relationship with the kitchen as a site of culture, creativity, and, as Grace Johnson put it, resistance. It is one of my favorite episodes and one of my favorite interviews that I've had and that we've had, and I think you're just going to love it.
And until then, eat something delicious and in season. Know where it came from, and thank the people who grew it.
Thank you for listening, residents. We will be back next week. Mwah. Hoteler 360 is written and produced by Ariana Halvai and Lexi Moorhead. Interviews featured in this episode include Grace Johnson, educator and urban farm manager, Tucker Garrison, founder of Imlakesh Organics, and Cole Rainey, a land steward and community organizer at Sage Steward Farm. This episode was edited by Bob. Find us at hoteler360.com and wherever you listen to your podcasts.